Good afternoon. It's Saturday, the 12th of September. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. The Republican-led U.S. House of Representatives cast largely symbolic votes against the Iranian nuclear deal and sought to restrict President Barack Obama's authority to lift sanctions against Tehran one day after the Senate ensured that the administration can implement the accord without congressional interference. After 3 hours of a hot-tempered debate, the House voted 269 to 162 to reject the deal, including 25 Democrats who broke away from Obama to register their disapproval. The fate of the agreement, however, was sealed on Thursday, even though 58 senators rejected the deal and only 42 supported it because the disapproval resolution needed 60 votes to move forward. During the House discussion on the matter, Democrats argued that the agreement would stabilize the Middle East, stop Iran from rushing to develop nuclear bombs, and offer the chance of ending the standoff with Iran diplomatically. Despite the victory for the White House, a vast majority of congressmen are still against the deal.
My colleagues, in pursuing this deal with Iran, President Obama refused to listen. He ignored the concerns of the American people, national security experts, and a bipartisan majority here in the Congress. And now he is preparing to try to enforce this deal over our objections. Never in our history has something with so many consequences for our national security been rammed through with such little support.
Now that Senate Democrats have successfully blocked the Republican bid to derail the landmark Iran agreement, efforts are underway to arrange a meeting between U.S. President Obama and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
There is an ongoing effort right now to arrange a meeting between the President and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I would anticipate that we'll have a date set shortly, but I think you can look for Prime Minister Netanyahu to visit the White House sometime in early November to meet with the President. Can't think of another situation over the last 6.5 years of this presidency where there has been an ally of the United States with whom we've had such a vigorous and public disagreement. But the fact that the leaders of these two countries can come together and have a conversation and have actually an in-person meeting is, I think, reflects the commitment of both of the leaders of both those countries to the strength of this relationship. And I think it also is an indication of how the President believes the future of the relationship between the U.S. and Israel is so critically important. And the President believes that that future is something worth talking about and investing in.
Jerusalem's former ambassador to Washington, Danny Ayalon, told IBA's Efrat Batat that the strategic alliance between Israel and the U.S. is stronger than the current strain in relations and that the rift can be repaired.
I think we must distinguish between the state-to-state relations and personal relations at the top. I think when it comes to the alliance between Israel and the United States, the friendship, it's solid. It is a natural alliance based on the mutual values and interests. So this will continue, no matter or regardless who occupies the White House at any given time or Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. The personal relations, we know, are not the best. Unfortunately, this is probably unprecedented. And the danger here that it reflects or it overshadows the entire relationship, and the perception by foes and friends alike may be miscalculated that there is a gap between Israel and the U.S. which can invite attacks on Israel, either politically at the UN or other international forums or here on the ground. So I would say that the sooner relationship will be mended, the better.
Do you believe it can be rectified?
Absolutely, because after all, we're not talking about just individuals, you know, with their own feelings and desires. We're talking about leaders of two countries which have responsibilities to the interest of their countries. So this can be amended. I would suggest, from a diplomatic point of view, a meeting which will be a tete-a-tete, just the two of them in the room, where they can scream and yell at each other without anybody noticing, and iron out all the differences. And the most important thing is for the time ahead, another year and a half of President Obama's presidency, is to work out a pattern of relations that will keep our interests best served for the next year and a half.
Keeping in line in what you're saying, did Netanyahu's insistence on opposition to this Iranian nuclear deal, which is pretty much a done deal, did that harvest more damage for Israel rather than benefit?
Well, unfortunately, I think now certainly we can talk in retrospect, and I have said right from the start, the writing was on the wall. And it was quite obvious that the president will have the votes to override any congressional decision. So just to make a point in a grandstanding way was not serving Israel. And in that case, I think there was a mistake done, which I hope in Jerusalem they will take lessons from. In any case, it is quite obvious that the deal with Iran is very bad. However, having said that, once it's a fait accompli, and basically it was a fait accompli when the 6 major powers of the world in Vienna signed with Iran, then we should have gone for plan B, which means how to minimize the damages and how to keep Israel's interests intact, and this was not done.
The remand of Gavriel Kasimov has been extended by 11 days on allegations that he murdered his wife in Petah Tikva yesterday. The 37-year-old suspect telephoned police to inform them that he had killed 30-year-old Irena Bongart, although after his arrest, he retracted that confession, and his attorney now says that his client has no memory of the incident. Bongart's 5.5-year-old son was in the apartment at the time of his mother's murder and is now in the care of welfare services. Authorities say that there were no previous complaints of domestic violence between the couple and that they were not known to police. A large-scale search has been underway since yesterday for a missing state witness whose testimony against dozens of figures in a well-known crime ring led to the conviction of several mob bosses. According to officials, the man was furious that he was not placed in a witness protection program and that local police were responsible for his welfare. He disappeared after saying goodbye to his family, and a police search of his home found it vacated. Authorities say that there is good reason to be concerned for his safety. Veteran far-left British lawmaker Jeremy Corbyn has been elected leader of his country's opposition Labour Party in a runaway victory that threatens to further divide the faction as it struggles to recover from a heavy defeat in the elections earlier this year. The 66-year-old politician strongly opposes government austerity policies as well as the United Kingdom's membership in NATO. He's also vocally pro-Palestinian and has been accused of being anti-Semitic. Even though he was once considered to be an outsider, in recent months he rose as the favored candidate over 3 more mainstream rivals to win. Cheers and applause erupted in the London conference venue when it was announced that Corbyn won nearly 60% of the vote, which was far ahead of his closest competitor, Andy Burnham, who garnered just 19%. Corbyn succeeds Ed Miliband, who stepped down after the May general election, and then he thanked voters for their support.
Can I start by thanking everyone who took part in this election, this huge democratic exercise of more than 500,000 people all across this country. It showed our party and our movement passionate, democratic, diverse, united and absolutely determined in our quest for a decent and better society that is possible for all.
In regional news, a towering construction crane toppled over during a violent rainstorm in the Saudi city of Mecca, Islam's holiest site, crashing into the Grand Mosque and killing at least 87 people ahead of the start of the annual Hajj pilgrimage later this month. Following the incident, police and onlookers attended to numerous bodies lying amid pools of blood on the polished mosque floors, and ambulances whisked away more than 200 other worshippers to area hospitals. The Grand Mosque and the cube-shaped Kaaba within it draws Muslims from all sects from around the world throughout the year, although numbers increase significantly in the run-up to the Hajj, which is expected to start around September 22nd. Performing the pilgrimage once during one's lifetime is a duty for all able-bodied adult Muslims. There's been a great deal of drama in Egypt with the mass quitting of the government. The cabinet, led by Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahleb, submitted resignation papers to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who accepted the unanimous collective move and then quickly tasked outgoing petroleum minister with forming a new government. He also ordered the current cabinet to continue with its responsibilities until the formation of the next coalition. The reason for the unexpected walkout remains unclear at this point, but it came just days after the Republic's agriculture minister was arrested amid allegations of corruption. Staying in the region, and U.S. President Barack Obama is warning Russia against bolstering its support of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, including the recent increase of sending military equipment and personnel to the Arab Republic in a bid to prop up the embattled leader. Moscow is denying those allegations, maintaining that the surge of military activity is part of the international efforts to defeat the Islamic State. In a dig at Obama's strategy, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called on world powers to join his country in that pursuit, saying that ISIS cannot be defeated by just airstrikes and that it is necessary to cooperate with ground troops, of which he said the Syrian army is the most efficient force to combat the extremist insurgents. Russia's military moves dashed recent hopes among U.S. officials that the Kremlin may be tiring of backing its longtime ally, Assad, after more than 4 years of a civil war that has claimed more than 250,000 lives and created a vacuum for extremism to thrive. Washington has been trying to gauge Russia's willingness to help restart a political process to remove Assad from power, although now Obama is painting that prospect as grim. During a town hall meeting with U.S. military personnel, the president went so far as to say that the new action may prevent the achievement of a political solution that is necessary to return peace to Syria. The United Nations Refugee Agency is welcoming the U.S. announcement that it will absorb 10,000 asylum seekers from Syria over the next year, although at the same time saying that Washington is capable of providing even greater assistance. This as the International Organization for Migration is reporting that its estimate of the number of Syrians who arrived in Greece this year has now nearly doubled to more than 175,000 people. The Geneva-based intergovernmental agency attributes the spike to both an accelerated influx of those coming from the Turkish coast to the nearby Greek islands in recent days, as well as a lag in the determination of nationalities of the migrants by overwhelmed Greek authorities. More than 432,000 refugees have crossed the Mediterranean so far this year, which is already more than twice the number who managed to successfully do so in 2014. As global attention focuses on the intensifying refugee crisis in Europe, Israel's in the midst of reviewing its own policies on the absorption of those seeking asylum. Migrant affairs expert of the College of Law and Business, Dr. Tali Kritzman-Amir, discussed the system here at home with IBA's Efrat Batat.
The system in Israel is constantly changing due to the High Court of Justice massive involvement in this system. But basically what happens is that only in the last couple of years, asylum seekers from Eritrea and Sudan are able to apply for asylum. The state has barely handled their asylum applications, and to the extent that the asylum application was examined, the vast majority of them were rejected. We're talking about a 0.1% recognition rate of refugees in Israel, which falls much, much lower than in any other Western country, especially if we take into account this population. I mean, Eritreans and Sudanese in other countries are recognized in over 70% of the cases. That's as far as recognition is concerned. Asylum seekers who reach Israel are also likely to be detained for a period of a few months in the detention center in the south, in Saronim. And after they're released from the detention center, they're likely to be held in another facility which is very close to a detention center, but is allegedly open, and that's the Cholot camp, which is right next to the Saharonim. So we see that Israel is taking a variety of steps to make sure that the asylum seekers are not integrated into the society, are not a part of the workforce, and are not given any substantial human rights here.
Following overwhelming approval of a resolution permitting Palestinians to raise their flag at the United Nations General Assembly, residents of Jerusalem offered mixed reaction to this latest symbolic step toward Palestinian statehood.
It's a typical situation in the United Nations, nothing surprising, nothing we haven't heard before. If it comes to any time that they can delegitimize Israel, because that's what the Palestinians ask for, that's what they do. Up is down, black is white, it just doesn't matter.
I think that it's a good thing that there's going to be a flag, a Palestinian flag at the United Nations. I think that in fact the two-state solution is pretty much dead on the ground, but at the same time it's the only viable solution for the peoples here in the short term, and in order to try and make that happen, I think there needs to be more recognition and therefore the appropriate pressure, and I think the flag will contribute to that.
I don't feel what the United Nations is doing is correct, because it's United Nations and Palestine is not a nation yet, and it's not really fair for the negotiations to come over and give them the statehood before it's actually a state. And I feel that the negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis should be together and not from outside sources and outside bodies that come over and tell us what to do.
Turning now to New York, where the families of victims killed in the September 11th terror attacks marked the anniversary in a subdued gathering at the Ground Zero site of the Twin Towers, saying that their determination to commemorate their loss publicly has not dimmed, even with the passing of 14 years and the thinning of crowds at the ceremony. Hundreds of victims' relatives attended the observance, although in fewer numbers than in early years after the attacks, for what has become a tradition of tolling bells, moments of silence, and the reading of the names of the nearly 3,000 people killed in the commercial airliner strikes on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And here at home, a special ceremony was held at Beit Site outside of Jerusalem in commemoration of the 9/11 victims. The chairman of the Jerusalem National Fund, Effie Stenzler, says that the nation of Israel salutes the first responders and those who died in the terror attacks, adding that the memorial in Jerusalem is the largest outside of the United States itself. Arut Sheva caught up with U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro, who attended the ceremony.
We already knew before September 11th what a dangerous world it is, but of course suffering the losses we did in the terrorist attacks of 9/11 brought home the need to fight terror wherever it exists, to stand firm for the values of our society, and to stand and fight with our allies against violent extremists and terrorists. And we've done that every day since the attacks of 9/11.
After agreement with Iran, do you think the government take the lessons from 9/11?
I think the agreement with Iran will actually help us pursue the lesson of 9/11. The agreement with Iran will prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. That's the most dangerous threat. And once we remove that threat from the table, it allows us to fight even harder to counter other Iranian threats, the support for terrorist organizations, the provision of weapons to Hezbollah, the destabilization of neighbors, the threats against Israel. And so it's a safer environment for us to carry out those very important struggles, because we don't have to worry about any time in the near future Iran achieving a nuclear weapon.
The relationship between Israel and the United States?
It's as strong as it's ever been. The values that we share, the common interests that we share, the common security that we both work together every day between our militaries and our intelligence services and our governments and our people is really what binds us. And we have disagreements. We've had a very honest disagreement about this Iran deal, but in no way will that change the commitments we have to each other. And today's ceremony at the beautiful 9/11 Memorial here in Israel underscores the solidarity and the partnership that we feel for one another.
On to happier news, and there was a bit of a surprise at the Ramat Gan Safari Park this week when the very first red baboon was born. She was delivered by a 4-year-old light-colored mother named Sahara. Veterinarians say that in order for that to happen, Sahara must have carried a recessive gene that may now be passed on to future generations. The baboons belong to the Papio hamadryas species that originate in northeast Africa, where they are threatened by the loss of habitat due to major agricultural expansion. Despite her inexperience, staffers say that Sahara has been a devoted mother who spends all of her time caring for her red-haired infant daughter.
us, it's really amazing, and we are very happy because we had already in the past two light fur baboons, but none of them gave birth. Sarah is the first one that gave birth. She gave birth, although to a dark colored baboon, but we still hope that the gene of the redhead is still in our group.
Turning now to arts and entertainment, and if you're in the north, you may want to head over to Kibbutz Nir David to the Aussie Gan Guru Park on Tuesday, where the annual kite flying festival will be held from 9 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. Both pros and amateurs are welcome, and you can either bring your own kite or even join a kite building workshop. Later in the month, the 6th Aboriginal Festival will be taking place at the same site. The Australian-themed nature park will be turned into a village featuring traditional storytelling, food sampling, boomerang throwing, face painting, and arts and crafts. Every day between the 29th of September through October 1st, there will be an Aboriginal music show at noon and then again at 2 p.m. That's the Gan Guru in the Jezreel Valley, which sounds like a great cultural place to spend some time over the holidays. Turning to the weather, and we finally have a little good news for you. Tomorrow we will feel a slight drop in temperatures, even though it will still remain warmer than normal for this time of year. Isolated rain showers are also expected in the southern Negev and Arava regions. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. I know it's not a lot, but we have to be grateful for every bit that we get. So thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow when I'll be back to bring the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a good week and a very happy new year, and shalom from Jerusalem.